Over 200 million years ago, long before Earth was more than cosmic dust, before our sun ignited the cold void, and before time had meaning for any being in this galaxy, there existed a race older than history itself. The Lyrans, the first true civilization of the galaxy, flourished. Their society was a beacon of light and wisdom in an otherwise dark and untamed universe. The Lyrans were magnificent beings, tall, with radiant, almost ethereal forms that glowed with the energy of the stars. Their eyes, deep and knowing, reflected a civilization that had existed for so long it seemed timeless. The Lyrans' mastery over science, art, and spirituality was unparalleled, and they had forged a peaceful empire that spanned countless star systems. But no light exists without casting shadows. And in the shadows, something terrible stirred. From the dark recesses of the galaxy emerged the Draconians, a race born of the chaos that lurks in the void between stars. Unlike the Lyrans, the Draconians were beings of pure malevolence, towering reptilian creatures with scales as hard as the armor of a warship, and minds twisted by an insatiable thirst for power. Where the Lyrans sought harmony, the Draconians craved domination. They were war incarnate, a plague of destruction that devoured entire worlds without mercy. For eons, the Draconians had watched the Lyrans from the fringes of the galaxy, envious of their light, bitter in their hate. They had grown strong in the shadows, breeding vast armies and constructing war machines, the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. The Lyrans, in their noble arrogance, believed that their philosophy of peace would protect them, that no force would dare challenge their dominance. They were wrong. It began with a silence, a deep, unsettling quiet that fell over the outer colonies of the Lyran Empire. Communications went dark. Trade routes were severed, and ships sent to investigate vanished without a trace. Panic spread, but the Lyrans, ever composed, believed it to be a minor disturbance, a cosmic anomaly. But then came the screams. A torrent of desperate, terrified cries broadcast across the stars from the doomed colonies as they were obliterated by the Draconian fleets. The Draconians did not merely attack, they slaughtered. Entire planets were reduced to cinders in hours, their surfaces scorched, and their inhabitants vaporized in blinding flashes of destruction. The Draconians descended like beasts, with claws that tore through steel and fangs that feasted on the flesh of their enemies. There was no negotiation, no warning, only death. The Lyrans, caught off guard by the ferocity and savagery of the Draconian assault, scrambled to mount a defense. Their fleets, though technologically superior, were no match for the sheer brutality of the Draconian war machine. For every Lyran ship that was lost, 10 more Draconian warships emerged from the void, bristling with weapons that unleashed storms of fire and death. As the Lyrans witnessed the relentless decimation of their colonies, they realized that this was not a mere skirmish, but an existential threat. The Draconians were not content with conquest. They sought the utter annihilation of the Lyran race. The Lyrans, long accustomed to peace and prosperity, found themselves plunged into a nightmare of endless war. Their serene worlds, once teeming with life and culture, became battlegrounds, scarred by the merciless onslaught of the Draconians. The Lyrans, once revered as the galaxy's most advanced and enlightened civilization, were now fighting for their very survival. The peaceful, radiant beings were forced to embrace the horrors of war, crafting weapons of unparalleled power and developing strategies born of desperation. Yet despite their best efforts, they could not stem the tide of destruction that swept through their empire like a wildfire. With each passing day, the Draconians pushed further into Lyran space, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The Lyrans, who had once believed in the invincibility of their civilization. The first strike had been only the beginning, and the war that followed would test the very limits of Lyran endurance. The conflict that followed was not a war in the conventional sense. It was a cataclysm, a struggle for survival that engulfed the entire galaxy. The Draconians unleashed their full might, deploying fleets that blotted out the stars and legions of ground troops that razed entire cities to the ground. The Lyran worlds, once vibrant and full of life, became charnel houses, their skies filled with the smoke of burning civilizations. The Draconians showed no mercy. They hunted the Lyrans with a relentless fury, driven by a deep, primal hatred. The Lyrans, once proud and unchallenged, were now refugees in their own empire, fleeing before the onslaught of a foe that knew no compassion, no restraint. The Draconians did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for total annihilation. Their goal was nothing short of the complete eradication of the Lyran race, to wipe them from existence as if they had never been. The Lyrans, though outnumbered and outmatched, fought with desperate courage. They used every weapon at their disposal, from advanced energy cannons to psychic attacks that could shatter minds. But the Draconians were relentless. For every Draconian warrior that fell, 100 more took its place, driven by a singular purpose: to destroy. As the war dragged on, the Lyrans faced not only the overwhelming might of the Draconian forces, but also the psychological toll of witnessing their civilization's systematic destruction. The Lyran leadership, once confident in their ability to protect their people, now grappled with the harsh reality that they were losing ground with every passing moment. The war of annihilation was taking its toll, not just on the battlefield, but on the very soul of the Lyran people. The Draconians, in their ruthless campaign, employed tactics that shattered the Lyrans' morale. They targeted cultural and spiritual centers, erasing millennia of history and wisdom in the blink of an eye. Sacred sites, where Lyrans had once gathered in peace and contemplation, were desecrated and destroyed. The Draconians sought not just to defeat their enemies, but to erase every trace of their existence, to make sure that the Lyrans would be forgotten by the stars. In response, the Lyrans adopted a strategy of guerrilla warfare, using their intimate knowledge of the star systems they had once ruled to launch surprise attacks and ambushes. These acts of defiance, though small in scale compared to the might of the Draconian fleets, provided glimmers of hope in an otherwise bleak and desperate war. Lyran warriors, driven by the knowledge that they were fighting for the survival of their race, struck with the precision of a cornered animal, inflicting significant damage on Draconian forces. However, these victories were fleeting, and the relentless advance of the Draconians continued unabated. The Lyran population dwindled, their numbers reduced by the ceaseless brutality of the conflict. Once thriving metropolises became ghost towns, their grand architecture reduced to rubble. The stars that had once illuminated the Lyran Empire with hope and wisdom now bore silent witness to its slow, agonizing extinction. The war raged on for millennia, with no corner of the galaxy untouched by its devastation. The Lyrans, once rulers of the stars, were pushed back, their empire crumbling under the weight of the Draconian onslaught. One by one, their homeworlds fell, their great cities, jewels of the cosmos, reduced to nothing but dust and memories. The final blow came on Lyra Prime, the heart of the Lyran civilization, the Draconians descended upon the planet with their full force, unleashing weapons of unimaginable destruction. The sky itself burned as fleets clashed above, and on the ground, the Draconians tore through the last lines of Lyran defense. The Lyrans, knowing this was the end, fought with the fury of the damned, but it was not enough. The Draconians, driven by their insatiable hatred, obliterated the planet in a cataclysmic explosion that sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Lyra Prime was gone. The Lyran civilization, which had stood for millions of years, was no more. The few surviving Lyrans scattered across the galaxy, fleeing to distant star systems in a desperate attempt to escape the Draconian wrath. They became nomads, hiding among the stars, blending with other species, and passing down their knowledge in secret. The Draconians, having achieved their dark goal, turned their attention elsewhere, leaving the remnants of the Lyran race to their fate. But the story of the Lyrans did not end there. Though their civilization was destroyed, their legacy lived on. The Lyrans had seeded the galaxy with their wisdom, and in the eons that followed, their influence could be seen in the development of new civilizations that rose from the ashes of their empire. The Lyrans, once rulers of the stars, became silent guardians, guiding the younger races from the shadows, ensuring that their ancient enemies, the Draconians, would not bring about the same destruction again. With the Lyrans crushed, and their civilization reduced to nothing more than a whisper in the galactic winds, the Draconians sought new conquests. Their thirst for power and destruction was insatiable, and they were driven by a deep-rooted belief that they were destined to rule the galaxy by any means necessary. Their eyes turned toward the Orion constellation, home to a budding coalition of advanced civilizations. Among them were the Orions and the Syrians, who had established flourishing societies rich in culture and technological prowess. The Draconians viewed these civilizations as both a threat and an opportunity. A threat because they were growing in strength, and an opportunity because they were ripe for conquest. Thank you for joining Mysteries Beyond Earth. Like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, never stop exploring the unknown.